Authority bias. You treat information differently, depending on who delivers it. A recommendation from a doctor carries more weight than the same recommendation from a stranger, even when the doctor has no relevant expertise in that specific claim. Celebrities endorse financial products. Scientists are quoted outside their fields. Retired generals appear in political advertisements. Your brain shortcut verification when credentials are visible. Evaluating every claim independently is cognitively expensive, so your mind delegates. Authority markers are easy to borrow and almost never checked. The uniform, the title, the institutional affiliation. Each one signals trustworthiness before a single word has been evaluated. Social proof dependence. You look at what others are doing before deciding what to do yourself. When a restaurant is full, you assume the food is good. When a product has thousands of reviews, you trust it more than an identical one with none. The mechanism is uncertainty reduction. Your brain outsources judgment to the crowd because crowds, statistically, often know something you don't. The problem is that consensus can be manufactured. Follower counts are inflated. Review systems are gamed. Social proof is presented as organic when it is frequently engineered. You follow what appears popular, and appearance is far easier to construct than quality. Scarcity trigger. You react to scarcity without questioning whether it is real. When something is presented as limited, in quantity, time, or access, its perceived value rises automatically. The mechanism is loss aversion. The psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. Retailers mark items only 3 left. Airlines show seats disappearing in real time. Exclusive communities restrict membership to manufacture desirability. None of this necessarily reflects genuine constraint. Urgency is a design choice. Your decision window narrows when scarcity is introduced, and that narrowing is precisely what the system is built to produce. Fear of exclusion. You are wired to avoid being left out. This is not a social preference. It is a survival instinct that modern influence systems exploit with precision. Limited time group offers, invitations that expire, language like join thousands who already have. All of it activates circuitry that once made isolation genuinely dangerous. On social media, this produces anxiety when you are absent from a conversation everyone else appears to be having. In sales, it is the velvet rope. The mechanism is tribal belonging. You don't just want the product or the access, you want to remain inside the group that has it. Status comparison. You constantly measure your standing relative to others. This is not vanity. It is an automatic evaluation system your brain runs using the people around you as reference points. When a colleague is promoted, you reassess your own position. When someone in your social circle buys something, it shifts your baseline for what is normal to own. Marketers use aspirational imagery, not to sell products, but to engineer a gap between where you are and where you are made to feel you should be. The product is then positioned as the tool that closes that gap. You purchase the distance. The object is incidental. Repetition conditioning. You become more comfortable with ideas the more often you encounter them. This is called the mere exposure effect, and its results are consistent across populations. Familiarity breeds acceptance, not because an idea has been evaluated and found correct, but because it no longer feels foreign. Political messaging repeats simple phrases over months of continuous coverage. Brands run the same advertisement until recognition converts to preference. The mechanism requires no agreement. It requires only exposure. You don't have to believe something to begin treating it as background, as part of the landscape. You only have to encounter it enough times for it to stop registering as new. Emotional contagion. You absorb the emotional state of the environments you move through, often before your conscious mind identifies what is happening. You walk into a tense room, and your body mirrors it. Online, this effect scales without limit. Outrage spreads faster than neutral information because it produces stronger physiological response, which triggers sharing, which amplifies reach. News and social platforms optimize for emotional activation because activation drives time on site. Political content targets fear and anger specifically because those states narrow deliberate thinking and increase compliance. Your emotional condition and the decisions it generates is frequently imported from your environment rather than produced independently from within it. Identity attachment. You defend positions more fiercely when those positions are attached to your sense of self. When a belief becomes part of who you are, political, cultural, religious, dietary, challenging that belief no longer feels like an intellectual exercise. It registers as an attack. The mechanism is ego protection. Influence systems exploit this by connecting products, ideologies, and candidates to group identity rather than to facts or features. Once you adopt the identity, you defend what belongs to it automatically. A gun owner who sees firearms policy as personal identity responds differently than a voter weighing policy trade-offs. Evaluation stops at the boundary of the self. Incentive blindness. You rarely trace the incentive structures behind the advice you receive. A financial advisor recommending a product may be earning a commission on that specific recommendation. A researcher whose study endorses a drug may be funded by the drug's manufacturer. An influencer calling a product life-changing is often contractually required to say so. The mechanism is trust displacement. You perceive expertise or enthusiasm and don't follow the financial architecture behind it. The conflict of interest doesn't automatically make the advice wrong, but it makes it systematically skewed in a specific, predictable direction. You are not evaluating the claim. You are absorbing the presentation. Familiarity bias. You are more likely to choose something familiar than something objectively superior that you haven't encountered before. Brands invest heavily in awareness, not because awareness signals quality, but because awareness itself drives preference. In relationships, you extend trust to people who resemble people you already know. In low-information elections, name recognition outperforms policy platforms. The mechanism is processing fluency. Familiar things feel easier to think about, and your brain interprets that ease as a positive signal. Familiarity is mistaken for trustworthiness. Recognition is mistaken for recommendation. The less mental effort required to process something, the more instinctively favorable your response to it becomes. Cognitive overload. You make worse decisions when overwhelmed with information. This is not a flaw. It is a rational response to finite mental resources. But influence systems exploit it deliberately. Insurance documents are written to exhaust rather than inform. Terms of service are structured to be abandoned. Product pages flood you with options, then highlight the one they want you to select. The mechanism is decision fatigue. When the cost of careful evaluation becomes too high, you default to the familiar, to the option presented most prominently, to whatever requires the least effort. The default option is almost never chosen by accident. It is placed there by design. Habit automation. You repeat behaviors that once required conscious decision-making until they require no decision at all. Roughly half of daily actions are habits, responses triggered by context rather than actively chosen. Influence systems work to install habits because a habit removes competitors from consideration entirely. You don't evaluate your coffee brand each morning, you reach for it. App designers engineer habit loops deliberately. Trigger, action, variable reward. The variability is essential. Unpredictable rewards sustain the loop far longer than consistent ones. Your phone is not a communication tool. That became addictive incidentally. The behavioral loop was architected before the product was released. You are running a sequence someone else wrote